Hello guys, my name is Balkrishna Srivastav and welcome to Code with BK. So in this video, we write a Java program to read array input of strings. So before we begin, it is a request to please subscribe to my channel because out of 100 videos, only 1 or 2 are subscribed and a subscription is very important. So please do subscribe to my channel. So let's begin. So in this program, we see how to read array input of strings, and I have divided the possible cases of input into 4 separate cases. The first one being we have input consisting of 2 lines. The first line of input is the number of elements in the array, which is n, and the second line of input contains n space separated strings. Okay, each string to be read does not contain a white space, and this is because we are segregating two input strings using a white space. So let me show you. So in the first example, we have the first line of input as 5, which is the number of strings we need to read, and the following line contains 5 space separated integers. Okay, so this is one string, second string, third string, fourth string, and fifth string. So output array should be something like this. Okay, and why these strings cannot have a white space? Because we are using white space to separate two strings. Okay, so it also happens that you might face a question where two strings are not separated by a white space and they are separated by something else. Okay, so the processing changes accordingly. All right, in our second example, we have the first line of input as 10, so 10 space separated strings in the next line. Okay, and the output something looks like this. Okay, all right, so I have already written a method that prints the array in the required format. So if the array is like this, okay, we print this. Okay, let me give you a look at the method. Okay, all right, and now we write the code to read this input. Okay, so I will start with the scanner object. Scanner equal to new scanner system dot in. Okay, and I'll close the scanner at the end. Okay, and I will also have to add import. Okay, so the first thing we need to read is this line of input. Okay, so I will say int n is scanner dot next int. All right, and then I read n strings where each string does not have a white space, so I can use has next and next. Okay, so before reading the strings, I need to create an array. So I'll say string arr equal to new string n. Okay, and since I know in the input after this integer I have n space separated strings, each string does not have a white space, so I can continuously call the next method n times. So I will say for int I equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Okay, and in each iteration you call the next method from the scanner object. Okay, this will return a string which you store in the ith index in this array, because next basically looks for a string that does not contain a white space, and it also ignores all white spaces that come before that. Okay, so when you do next int, this integer is z. When you do next, this is z. When you do next again, this is skipped and this is red. When you call next again, this is skipped and this is red. Okay, and I've also posted a separate video in detail where I explain how next works, and another video to explain how next int works. Okay, I will add the links of the videos in the description. Okay, so now that I've read the input, all I need to do is print this. So I'm going to say system dot out dot print, okay, array. Okay, followed by this print array method. All right, so this is read array input strings 1. So I'm going to say java c read array input strings 1 dot java. Okay, java read array input strings 1. So there is no prompt being printed on the screen. Okay, so all I need to do is pass the user input. So 5 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, all right, running this again, 10 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. All right, this is our first case. Let me take another case. I'll say 1, I'll say 1. I'll say another case, I'll say 3, I'll say I am Balkrishna. Okay, I'll say 4. Oh, I need to run the code first. I'll say 4, welcome to Code with BK. Alright, so when I said input 4 and I passed only 3 strings, it is still waiting for another string which I need to pass. So I can say help. So welcome to code with BK and help. Okay, and this is because next was waiting for another string. Okay, all right. So this was our first case. Let's move on to the second case now. So in this second case, we have only one line of input to read our input of strings, and this line contains n space separated strings. Okay, and each string to be read does not contain a white space because we are using white space to separate two strings. Okay, so in this first example of input, we have 5 strings like this, and the output is something like this. In the second case, we have something like this as the input, and this is the array we expect. So input is basically one single line that contains n space separated strings. Okay, so in my main, I start with a scanner object, scanner equal to new scanner system dot in. Okay, and I have to import the scanner on top, import java. Alright, so input is basically only one line, so I'm going to read that line into this variable strings using the next line method of scanner class, and then I'm going to close the scanner. So I have this string that contains my n space separated strings. Okay, now I need to extract n strings out of this variable strings. Okay, so what I do is I create another scanner object. I say this is scan strings equal to new scanner strings. Okay, all right. So scanner object can read from different sources. Okay, one being the standard input, which is your terminal or console where you type, and the other being strings, and you can read from file as well. Okay, so how you can relate this is basically when you type input in your terminal or console, whatever input you type goes as a string into this scanner object. Okay, so what you can do is you can directly use that string as a source in a scanner object, so scanner objects can also take strings as a source. All right, now I need to count how many strings we have in this strings variable. Okay, so I'm going to set n equal to 0. Okay, to count I will say while scan strings dot has next. Okay, so this will return true as long as there is a string to be read. Has next will return true if there is a string to be read that does not contain white spaces. That is basically saying for has next, string is a continuous sequence of non-white space characters. Okay, so you read a string, you say scan strings dot next. Okay, and you increment the count by 1. Okay, so by the time this while loop closes, n contains the number of strings in strings. Okay, in this variable. Okay, so we have scanned this entire strings variable that we read, which was a single line of input using this scan strings object. Okay, so now we know the number of strings n in this variable strings, but we haven't stored the strings extracted out of this variable anywhere. So what we do the scanning again. I use this variable to create a scanner object with the same strings. Okay, because this has not changed. Okay, it's just that we have scanned this once entirely using this loop. Okay, and before I start my scanning again, I create an array to store the strings. So I'll say string arr equal to new string n, because I exactly know how many strings are there in this strings variable. Okay, I do the same exact thing because scanning remains the same. In this case, we were just extracting in order to count how many strings are there. In this case, we will extract and store. So I say string equal to scan strings dot next, and instead of using this, I start with a index I equal to 0 that will store the string into the ith variable in this array. I'll say arr equal to string. Okay, so you can close this scanner. Okay, it does not make a difference because you're creating the scanner again, and you can close here again. Okay, it does not really make a difference. Okay, so in short, what we did was we created a scanner object using the strings input. Okay, the one line of input, we just counted how many strings are there. Then we create an array to store the strings. We create the same scanner object again using the same idea to scan. We basically store strings from this strings variable into our array now. Okay, and you have to do I plus plus. Finally, we print the array. So I'm going to say system.out.print array. Okay, and call this method print array. So I'll say print array. Yeah, all right. So clear compiling the second case now, running this now. This is strings 2. Okay, so I'll say 1 2 3 4 5, one line of input, 5 strings, all space separated. This is my array. Running this again, I say 1 2 3, I pass only 3 inputs. Running this again, my name is Balkrishna. Okay, running this again, say maybe I am a big fan of Virat Kohli. Okay, so this was our second case of input. Alright, so moving on to the third possible case of input is basically to read array input of strings where input consists of n plus 1 lines. The first line of input contains the number of elements in the array, which is n. Then following n lines each contain an input string. Okay, so this is the case where we can have white spaces within strings. So each input string is basically on a separate line. Okay, since each input string is separate line, string can have white spaces. Okay, so if you look at this example, first is the number of strings and then we have n strings each in a separate line. Okay, similarly for this case. Okay, so again I'm going to use scanner object. The first thing I need to read is the number of strings to be read, which is an integer. So I say int n is scanner dot next int. Okay, so I know the number of strings to be read, so I can create my array string arr equal to new. So we create an array of size n and now we need to read the strings. Okay, so I loop for n times. Okay, and in each iteration I read a line using a scanner, and I'm using next line because each input string is on a separate line. Okay, right, and then I store this string into the ith location. All right, okay, I can close the scanner here itself. Okay, I'm printing the array using the same print array function. All right, so let me run this. Clear Java C. This is the third case. Java. So 5 1 2 3 4. Okay, so you see it did not wait for me for the fifth line of input. The array has 5 locations, that is there, but the first line of input is a blank string. So why is this happening for this input? So I have taken this input in a separate file. Okay, so I'm going to run with input redirection. It will give me the same output, strings in 3, right? You see, same output for this input. Okay, and this is happening because when you do next int to read the integer, it only reads this integer part. This extra change in line after the integer is still there in the input buffer. So the first next line basically reads this change in line after you read the integer. Then this is read as the second line of input. Then this is read as the third line of input, fourth and fifth. That's why you get this line of input which you read first, okay, after the integer as a blank line, which we can see here. Okay, and again I have already posted a separate video that explains how to work with next int and next line together so that you don't get a blank line of input. Okay, I will add the link of that video in the description. All right, so what we need to do is when we read this integer, okay, absorb the extra change in line. Okay, now when I compile and run using this strings 3 input, okay, I get the right output. Okay, if I change this to 8 5 6 7 8, okay, this is my input. Okay, I run with this input, I get 8. All right, so let me take another input, and this is because I want to demonstrate that each string can have a white space now because each string is on a separate line. Okay, so I run the same thing using strings in 4. So 1 is the first input, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4, 5 is 5. All right, if you make this 6 6 is 6. Okay, running this again, you get 6 6 as well. And if you make this 5, only the first 5 will be read. You see, only the first 5 are read even though you have the 6th input. Okay, because the loop is running n times only and n is the value of the first read, which is 5. Okay, so this was a third case of input. Okay, where first line of input is the number of strings and then you have n strings following. So moving on to a last possible case where we have array input of strings and input consists of n lines where each line contains an input string. And since each input string is in a separate line, input string can contain white spaces. Okay, so this is a first sample input, each line of input in a separate line. Okay, so you get this as the output. Similarly, each line of input in a separate line. We don't have a separate integer that tells you how many lines to read like we had in the previous case. You just have n lines of input and you need to figure out how many lines of input are there. Okay, so again in the main I have taken a scanner object to read from standard input. So first I will just write the code to read all the strings. I won't be storing them. So what we can do, I can say while scanner dot has next line. As long as scanner has a next line, you say string s is scanner dot next line. Okay, you read the string and you say system dot out dot println input string is plus s. Okay, and this is the string input I will use for this case. Okay, each string in a separate line. Okay, 5 lines of input, 5 strings. Okay, so let me run this. Clear Java C Java input is 6 and running this 4th version. Okay, so input string is 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4. Okay, so we are able to read all the strings from the input. Okay, so input is 5 strings, we are able to print the 5 strings. Okay, now the problem here is that we are not storing the strings anywhere. So if you just want to continuously read and do some processing on it, you can read the string, do some processing and then move on to the next string. So what if you want to store the strings? You can say I will take an array. Okay, and the size of this array is very large. Okay, much larger than the number of inputs I expect. You can do this and you can take a counter of how many strings you have read. Okay, so you read the string and you store it in the array. Okay, and n plus plus. Okay, right. So this is possible when n is much less than 100. You know that the number of strings in input will be less than 100. Okay, so how do we print this? We can use the same idea. Okay, and with int string arr I take int n and I print till n. Okay, so I do system dot out dot print array. Okay, and I call this print array function, passing the array and then also passing how many strings to print, which is the first n, because I am only using the first n locations. Okay, so let me compile. Okay, running this on the same input. So now we are not printing each string as we read, we are printing the final array that we get. So array is 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 5, 7. Okay, if I add a couple of more lines, 6 is 6, 7 is 7. Okay, run this and you see. Alright. Okay, so you can do this by taking an array of a very large size. Okay, so that you are sure that all the strings you read will be able to fit in this array. Or you can take a resizing array. So I'll say static string. Okay, resize. Okay, I'll say string arr int n and string s. Okay, so this method basically takes the string array we have right now, the number of locations we are using in this array and the next string to add to this array. Okay, and then we are returning the updated array. So what I do, if number of locations used is equal to the length of this array, okay, it means I've used this entire array, I need to resize this array. So I create an array of double this size. I create a temp array of double the size. I'll say 2 into n. Okay, I copy everything from arr to temp. So I say for int I equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Okay, I say temp of I is arr of I. Okay, and then I set arr to temp. Okay, so temp is a fresh array of double the size. We are copying everything from arr to temp and then we are setting arr to temp. So in this case arr, the previous arr is lost and arr points to temp now. So temp is the updated array. Finally we do arr of n is equal to s and return arr. We are storing this string s into the nth index in this arr and returning the updated arr. So what you can do in this main is copy this, comment this out. We start with an array with location 1 only. Okay, We start with n equal to 0. While scanner dot has next line, we read a string and then we call this function every time we add to our array. So we say arr equal to resize arr pass n and s, and you increment n in each iteration because you are adding one more string to this arr. Okay, and finally we print arr with the first n locations. Okay, all right. So let me compile this. Okay, and let me run this with the last case, which was this. Running with the last case, 7 is 7. Okay, in this case also you don't have the exact size. Okay, so I can print system.out.println array size, which is equal to arr.length. Okay, so I'll compile, run. So array size is 8 and we are using 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 locations, so the last location is still available. Okay, if we have something like, say 8 is 8 and 9 is 9. Okay, running this input. Okay, so array size is 16 now. Okay, and we are using only the first 9 locations. Okay, and this resizing to double the size is very standard. You start with an array that has size 1 and then you keep doubling the size. Okay, so this was another way to store strings into your array, or you can have another way. I'll comment this out again. Okay, you use an array list. You say array list, okay, strings equal to new array list, and you do this thing while, okay, you read a string and you add it to your array list dot add s. Okay, and when you print out the array, okay, you simply do system.out.println array is plus strings, this array list you just created, and add import java.util.array list. Okay, all right. So using this now, compiling. Okay, I'll clear. Okay, compile again and running this in the previous case. Strings in 6 has 9 lines, so you see 9 lines. Okay, and if I remove a few here, I make it only 5. Okay, running this again and you only 5. Okay, all right. So this is another way you can do where you don't have to worry about the size of this array. Okay, so this was the solution to read array input of strings. All right, and I hope this was helpful. So if you like this video, if you found this helpful, please subscribe to my channel. And if there was something that you did not like about this video, please just don't press the dislike button. Please also let me know in the comments what was it that you did not like about this video, so that I can improve upon my further videos. And you can also let me know in the comments if there's a question you want to solve or if there's a concept you want to discuss. Thank you.